Hey everyone, this is Exploring Fiction. So in today's video, I just thought I'd go over my thoughts on the new Black Widow movie in the MCU. And I don't really want to say this is a review because I'm not going to be giving it a concrete rating within the MCU or just how I felt about it. I just really want to give my thoughts on it and kind of let you guys know how I felt about it. So of course, sorry for no video last week as it was 4th of July here in America. So I figured people would understand that there would be no video last week, but I'm back, and I just wanted to give my thoughts on the new Black Widow movie for today's video. So there will be some spoilers, but I will indicate when those will happen. I'll probably put those in a group section at the end, near the end of the video. But for right now, let's just get into the positives. First of all, I thought David Harbour as Red Guardian was really good in the movie. I really liked his character, and though for some reasons I didn't find his character the best, which I will get to in part of the spoilers, I thought that David Harbour's portrayal of Red Guardian and his acting in this film was very good. He was one of my favorite characters throughout the whole movie. Another positive was Natasha's sister Yelena. Now, I don't remember the actress's name who played Yelena, but I thought she did a very good job, although she had some jokes that just didn't land for me and were kind of awkward. I thought that this actress did a really good job with the character and what she was given in the script, and that you could feel her connection with Natasha very well. And that was an important part of the movie for me that I think needed to be felt. And I think it was for the most part because of Yelena and the actress who portrayed her. My third main positive was Taskmaster's design. Well, I'll go more into Taskmaster later in the video. I thought the design of Taskmaster's costume was great. I thought that in the comics, Taskmaster was a good comic book design, but I thought like something like Captain America's classic suit, it would be hard to replicate on the big screen and still have it look believable and actually usable and not just kind of tacky. But the way they put together Taskmaster's suit in this movie really impressed me, and I thought it was one of the better villain costumes of the MCU. And my fourth and final main positive about Black Widow was the insight we got into Natasha's past. So, of course, we've heard rumblings about it in previous movies and seen a flashback in Age of Ultron. But I like that we got more bits about her past and what it was like. It wasn't exactly what I expected, to be honest, but I didn't mind it, and I thought it made sense, and it was just cool to see at least something more concrete there. So now I'm going to be getting into the negatives or critiques I have of this movie, and there are a lot more than positives. And I'll explain what I think about this movie overall in the final thoughts section, but just know that there are more negatives for me personally. So the first one is that I felt it was way too over the top. Now, you would think suspension of disbelief in the MCU goes pretty far. Like, I would say for someone like Captain America or Thor, the suspension of disbelief you can have is very high because, of course, they're either a superhuman on super strength serum or they're a god from another world. But Black Widow is just a spy assassin who's really good at combat. And I thought this movie was way too over the top for this character, since she's doesn't really have anything super about her except that she's a very well-trained assassin. So I thought there were car crashes that no regular human would have survived, multiple of them. The finale fight was just way too over the top, and there were just many times throughout the movie I thought Natasha and her family would have died, and they didn't, but she wouldn't have died if she was a superhuman per se, but since she's just Black Widow, she definitely should have died, and for that reason I thought the movie just went way over the top in a few too many places for me to find it believable. My second critique of this movie is that there's too much humor during heavy moments. So of course I won't get into any spoilers or anything, but I just thought that a lot of the jokes, like of course you come to expect jokes in an MCU film, obviously. It's kind of the precedent at this point. But I just thought that there were too many jokes at times that could have been used to make an emotional statement or be a really emotional moment. And of course, I feel like that's kind of a theme in some of these MCU movies, is that jokes take away from what could be very emotional and powerful moments, and I thought this movie just fell back into that trap, maybe a little too much. My next negative critique is that what I really wanted, thought this movie could be, and thought this movie was going to be, was a James Bond MCU film. Because when you think about it, there are some elements to this movie that made it seem like it could be a James Bond film, such as the location of the main villain, like where his lair is, the fact that he's a heavily Russian accented villain gives you just flashbacks to James Bond. But I thought that it came close too much to a typical MCU superhero movie and didn't lean into what it could be enough. I just thought that this movie could have been like a Daniel Craig James Bond movie where it was avoiding the outlandish aspects of Bond but leaning into the more modern versions of it, and it could just be the MCU version of that, since Black Widow is very close to James Bond of the MCU, but it just fell back into the MCU formula a little too much, and it didn't really stand out in the aspects I thought it could have to make it a unique movie within the MCU. The next critique I have is that I felt rushed into the plot. Now again, I'm staying away from spoilers for this critique, but I felt like we didn't have enough chance to ruminate on the beginning of the movie where we see some of Natasha's past, and I felt that they didn't give us enough time to feel the family connection between her and the rest of her family. I just felt like they showed us a brief glimpse and said, okay, that's good enough. Now you care about these guys, and now we'll get you into the plot, and you can feel for them when things go wrong. I just felt that they didn't give me enough time to appreciate their family dynamic or care for the characters besides Natasha. Now, of course, Natasha has had almost 10 years to be built up, so I would care about her, and I did. But the rest of her family I just wasn't as attached to because they didn't give me enough time. They gave me some, but they didn't give me enough time to really feel for them, and I thought that made the movie suffer. And now these last two critiques, I will be including some spoilers. So if you want to see Black Widow, you have been warned, there will be spoilers with my last two critiques. So here we go. My first one was the Red Guardian versus Taskmaster fight, and Taskmaster as a whole. So first I'll go into Taskmaster. The fact that Taskmaster was the daughter of the main villain, Dreykov, and that she was the victim of something Natasha did in her past, I thought that was cool enough. But I thought that Taskmaster was totally wasted. She barely talked in the movie. And I thought that the way they made her power make sense in the movie was decent enough, but I just feel like they could have done so much more, and Taskmaster's power isn't so outlandish that you need to invent something new for the movie, but I thought that Taskmaster was just wasted and kind of thrown aside so that we could get a showdown that was barely shown. And that leads me into the Red Guardian versus Taskmaster fight, which was just such a letdown. Like, I wanted to see that more than the main finale battle, and it just kept cutting away every time things would get interesting. And that's the fight I really wanted to see. You know, the Soviet Captain America versus Taskmaster. That would have been great, but they didn't show it enough, and that was just really disappointing. And now my final critique, and the second one to include spoilers in it, is the men were the butt of all jokes in this movie. And I was talking to about this with a friend after I saw it, and I just said it wouldn't be bad that the men were the butt of all jokes, and that being the main sign of any wokeness in this movie, except that Disney's track record shows that they are woke, and so you can't help but notice it. So if Disney hadn't shown any signs of being woke before, you could brush it off and say, well, yeah, this is Black Widow. Of course it's going to be female-centric and female empowerment-ish, and that wouldn't bother me. But Disney has no track record of being neutral, so men being the butt of all jokes in this movie just makes you leave with a sour taste in your mouth, because Disney has been so woke before, you just can't help but feel like they had to throw it in there, and it feels woke even if they weren't intending it to, just because of their past. So, Red Guardian and the main villain, Dreykov, were the main victims of this because they were the two main male characters. Now, Red Guardian, who was Natasha's quote-unquote father figure in the movie, was always made fun of. He was always the butt of every joke, and none of the female characters ever seemed to like or respect him. Every time he would go for an emotional moment, or even a badass moment, he would just be made fun of or brushed aside, and the whole movie was like that, and eventually you start to just feel bad for him. Same thing with the main villain, Dreykov, and this was the part that really annoyed me the most, was for the final battle, Natasha and Dreykov are standing in his office, and she can't hurt him because of some strange pheromone thing he put in all of his Black Widows where they can't hurt him when they smell his pheromones. And now you think Natasha would become scared after learning that she physically cannot hurt him, and he starts punching her, and she laughs it off, just saying that he's weak, and he's such a fool, and he can't hurt her, and he's a wuss because his punches aren't hurting her. But I just found that really unrealistic, and it kind of took me out of the movie. Like, you just learned that you cannot physically hurt the man you're trying to kill, and now he's beating you up and you're just laughing it off. I mean, I get it. You're a powerful, very well-trained assassin, probably way more experienced in combat than your enemy. But the fact that you can't hurt him at all, physically, even if you really wanted to, which he did, probably should instill some fear in you. And she's just laughing off his punches. I just thought that was a little too far and a little too unbelievable. So here are my final thoughts on Black Widow. I thought it was too typical of an MCU movie in that it could have been something unique, kind of like Winter Soldier and James Bond mix, but it wasn't that. It leaned too heavily into MCU tropes and just kind of became a bland mess. I thought that this movie came out at the wrong time, like everyone else is saying. I thought it could have been great if it came out in the timeline it was supposed to, in between Civil War and Infinity War. And I just thought that this movie had a lot of wasted opportunities, despite the amazing cast. And it just did not really do it for me. I would say it's in the lower half of the MCU movies. It's enjoyable enough. if you can suspend your disbelief a lot for a character that really has no true superpowers. So, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. I would really appreciate it. And I will see you next week with another video. Thanks for watching. Bye.